Hello, world, and welcome to the Innovation Coaching Podcast. My name is Klaus Hostel, and with me today I have Donnacadh O'Briain. Donnacadh, tell me how I can help.
Well, lots of ways, really. I guess the short version is about a year and a half ago, after 20 years of mostly directing theater and developing stage work, I decided to change my career up fairly significantly, and that's led me to taking a strong interest and working as a learning experience designer, and also an experience designer and an immersive theater maker alongside a certain amount of theater career as well. So trying to harness many years working in live events and live experiences, but on a stage, and many years of training actors, writers, directors, but in one kind of niche area of craft. So trying to bring those skills together and kind of allow I think I have a natural curiosity and fascination, and I kind of have a growth mindset, I suppose. I kind of something I was lucky to have pretty young. Well, once I left school, I didn't have it at school, but after that, so I've been trying to kind of harness those things and push off in some new directions. So that's kind of the starting point for me, and learning experience design is the thing that I was thinking I would bring to this session.
Sounds good. Tell me more. So far, it sounds good. Then I'm tempted to ask, how's that working out for you? And maybe you're going to say brilliant, and that's not what we're talking about at all. Or maybe you're saying, yeah, it's not, or somewhere in between.
The on a kind of a, on a kind of a on a brass tacks level, which is that a British expression? I don't know. On a kind of on a right down to basics level, one of the things that happened was I turned around after the pandemic. I had three young kids, and I had to sit down with myself and go, you need to earn more money and you need to work less. If you're going to be a good dad and bring up your family properly, you're going to have to earn more, you're going to have to work less. It's not going to happen directing plays. It took me a long time to realize that. I was probably 39, 40 when I kind of finally realized that directing more plays wasn't the route to more income. It was the route to working non-stop, however, because it's an incredibly involved, an incredibly time intensive job. And essentially, the industry can't support the amount of time it takes to do the work with money. So the fees don't make sense. Anyway, so the short version is I pretty much immediately started earning more and working less, and I have continued to earn more and work less. So that's going well. No, I mean, we're not talking vast changes here. I live in the same house. We broadly speaking do the same things, but I have had more time to think, to plan, to parent, to relax. And I have earned more, which has facilitated that, I guess, basically. I haven't bought a new car, but I am going on holiday with my family for a month in August.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So that's on a kind of a dad level, on a life level, it's working well. And I'm very happy with those. I'm very happy that I took that decision to make the change. And then on a professional level, on a curiosity level, I'm enjoying the new challenges. So next week, I'm on Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm going to be in Princeton delivering training with two other people, plus a couple of actors. I'm going to be facilitating the training of the senior sales team at a major software company.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done that before. I've been involved in a couple of things similar to that at an insurance company, at Side Business School, Warwick Business School, small things similar to that, but nothing that's quite that. And it's been a lovely journey building it and planning it. And the story that I sent you is a story that I want to use at the very beginning of the workshop as a way of kind of just bringing everybody in and contextualizing why we're there, but also, I guess, a kind of a learning experience design trick, if you like, which is to get people emotionally engaged at the beginning. They're not going to expect to be emotionally engaged if they're coming in for sales training. But if you can get them emotionally engaged, you're going to change the paradigm of expectations and perhaps how they're going to begin over that initial hour following, maybe change their willingness to enter into certain things you're going to challenge them with. So yeah, I've loved the challenge of figuring that stuff out, and I'm really keen to do more of that. In October, I'm going to be building a immersive theatrical experience for 180 leaders in an insurance company, 30 at a time.
Mhm.
And they're going to go through this experience and they're going to learn something about leadership and people management.
Mm.
I've got no idea how because the ink is not quite completed on the contract, but it's happening. It's just I haven't quite started it. So I have this lovely thing which I'm enjoying at the moment, which is I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to be the senior person delivering it and writing it, and I'm kind of loving that really. And maybe that's in some ways it brings me here as well because I feel like the place innovation is most likely to happen is when your skill set meets I've got no idea how to do that, and those two things come together. That's what I hope. That's what I'm hoping.
I like that thinking. And let's start there. Let's start with just a little bit of innovation theory, right? This is from my innovation model. It's the point number 3, which is called challenge routines, of my 5 pillars of it. And what essentially I say there, and this is not, it sounds a little bit glorified when I say it, right? Because it's more like this is a thing that's true and others have said so before. I've just put it into this context. Innovation tends to happen at 2 points. It happens when we're desperate, and it happens when we feel invulnerable, when we've got enough, when we have surplus, right? It happens, you've got 3 kids, which is insane in itself. And if you weren't doing that insane job with doing theater directing, I would think you have 3 kids. That's a circus in itself. Like, how are you surviving that? But one of the things that happens when people get kids is suddenly they realize that, oh, they had these beautiful plans for getting kids. We're lucky we only have 1, and that's more than enough for us. Is all these beautiful ideas for what are we going to do and how's it going to be, and they find out reality is usually a bit tougher, and then they start to think of new ways to get more time or get more sleep or get less puke on themselves or get less messy diapers or whatever it is. That's all the parts of just having a kid, figuring out, okay, how do we do that easier, because they're desperate, right? They're not sleeping enough. They're not having as much fun as they want to. Their dreams of, oh, it's only going to be wooden toys and I'm going to play him to sleep every night is more like, could I just have a moment's peace? And suddenly they start innovating because they're desperate. The same goes for companies. The same goes for people when they're trying to lose weight or quit cigarettes or trying to earn extra money. When we're desperate, we start thinking new ways. However, and that we all know, right? It's the burning platform of the 1980s that consultants started talking about then, which is like, you must do it or everything will crash. We understand that. Now, the other side of innovation is innovation also happens when we're feeling invulnerable, when we've got enough. When we've got, if I give you $1 million, right, then you're going to spend them on, you're probably going to buy a house and you're going to do something nice for your parents and you're going to set aside some money for the kids and then you might do on a vacation, et cetera. And it's going to be crazy and it's going to be nice and you're going to feel, wow, this changed my life completely. But you're not going to go out and do bizarre stuff. If I give you $10 million, then you're going to do the things mentioned above. The house might be a bit nicer. There might be a little bit more money for the kids. The new car might be a bit nicer, but you're also going to start doing weird stuff. Oh, maybe I should, that old high school friend I had who's been struggling, I'll just send him $5,000 just as a, hey, nice meeting you. Good luck out there, because you just have 10 million sitting there and 5,000 feels like nothing. If I give you 100 million, you're going to go even more crazy. You're going to be like, oh, should I buy a Ferrari? Yeah. What am I going to use it for? Oh, I've thrown away the keys, but how expensive is a Ferrari really these days? Or should I buy a chateau in France and figure out I don't know what to do with it? All this sort of, you start doing new weird things when you have enough. And that doesn't matter if I give you 1,000 marbles or $100 million, or if suddenly you have, I know this is a weird scenario to think of, but imagine you had 2 weeks without your kids. Imagine things you'd try doing with that extra time. First, you just sink into a sofa and go, ah. Then you might even look at your better half and say, oh, you're a person too. Let's talk. Maybe. But then after some time, you're going to think, maybe I should take up roller skating. Or what about I looked at the attic? Or maybe I should watch this documentary. Things you normally would say, I don't have the resources. But now you have enough and you're going to take chances. You're going to try out new things. Innovation happens there as well. So if you can create these pockets of either desperation. It's better if it's self-chosen. That's why I mentioned kids. For many people, kids are something they choose. So even though they're desperate, it's a desperation of their choosing. It's not, you're now locked into this dungeon, figure it out, which is not a nice. You also get innovative there, but it's exhausting and anxiety provoking. So if you can create self-chosen desperation, that's a good space for innovation. Or if you can create these pockets of invulnerability, these pockets of enough, because that also means that within those pockets, you're going to start taking chances. You're going to start trying out things. And these are two good spaces for innovation.
Hmm. Do you think that also I guess in some ways, in a kind of a smaller way, that also makes me think of deadlines and downtime.
Exactly.
In some way, deadlines are, as someone who's spent most of my career working with writers and sometimes writing myself, people often want deadlines. They're desperate for a deadline because the deadline creates desperation. And then at the same time, what we're also desperate for is time and space with no pressure at all, because we know dream time, some people call it, right? Because we know that magic can happen in that quiet space. And we've experienced it, and it's glorious. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And you could lie there for 2 hours and nothing happens except you revolve around, the annoying thing that happened last week or some kind of domestic problem, and you can't get your head onto anything interesting. And then, maybe you fall asleep and you wake up and suddenly you're thinking about something else and something happens in your head. And that's just about space. And there's not a lot of it as a working parent. But yeah, it makes me think of the deadlines are a really kind of kind of everyday way of harnessing desperation or trying to bring that upon yourself.
Very much so. And that also means that while we're all used to this, we're used to to deadlines and the desperation that causes because, oh my God, it's tomorrow. I better start looking at what am I supposed to do? What most of us are not that good at are creating these pockets of dream time, these pockets of enough. And it can be a simple thing. Right? It can be a simple thing of saying, you know what? Hey, I'll take the kids for the weekend.
Mm.
And then first you have that, just a little bit of relaxation. And then you start going into your dream time, right? And that works for business as well. If you say, okay, let's spend an hour where there's nothing on the agenda. Well, okay, then we might think up some stuff and we might take some chances. But if we say, let's have a week where we've got nothing planned, then we might dig a little bit deeper.
Mm.
Then we might try out new things. And I love how you say it with actors and writers, for example, that they want that dream time because then they can experiment.
Mm.
I recently saw a lecture by a professor, a military historian who had visited, he'd written a book about Napoleonic battles. He had visited more than 50 of Napoleon's battlefields, and it had taken him 7 years to write that book. Now, if he'd gone into that with a deadline of 2 years, he would never have visited 50 because then he would have maybe visited a few, but he would not have said, oh, I'll just go for another one. But here he let the book take the time it would take. And of course, the downside was it took him 7 years to finish that book. The upside was that he did things he would never have done if he'd had the normal amount, right? And most of us live in that normal. We are neither desperate nor in dream time. We spend so much of our time just being either busy or exhausted or busy and comfortable. And the trick is to go beyond comfort, but to get to where you have dream time.
I think recently I have found some moments of that in the daytime, and I think what's interesting. I mean, other people will have their own versions of this, but I've only had one or two careers, so I don't have an exhaustive knowledge of what people's days are like. But as a theater director and an acting teacher, writing, directing teacher, it's a very front-facing job. You show up at 9:30 or whatever, and through till 5:30 if it's a normal day, you're standing in front of a lot of people, and they're either looking at you for direction. And I'm not talking about they're all sitting at their desks and every now and again they look up. No, they're literally looking at you. They're looking at you. It's like being a keynote speaker for 4 hours of your 8 hours, and the rest of the time you're looking at them and you're staring at them. So a lot of my job as theater director is staring at groups of people and it's about it's obviously you develop a kind of a very specific kind of intense listening skills. Very particular, very niche. It's not necessarily made me a great listener for my partner. I've got to work on that, but it's made me a great listener for actors, for watching live things evolve in front of me and reading them and understanding them and being able to feedback with precision. But it's intense. There's no stopping. There's dream time within that, but only about the thing you're literally doing that's right in front of you. And that, in a way, that those long periods of just staring and listening, it is a kind of a dream time. No one's watching you, you're watching them. And it's a very focused dream time with a very particular type of task. And that kind of is where creativity has happened for me in my career. I'm watching something and something strikes me. I realize something about the piece. I got better as I got older. When I started off, that would happen and I would stop everybody. I would make everybody stop because I'd realized something. As I got older, I realized, no, everybody, they need to keep working. They're in the middle of another thing. I just need to capture that thought, make a little note, keep working. And then, when the rest of the team have come to a natural pause in their own action, they're in the middle of a thing. Once that concludes, I'll find the right moment to share my thought. But anyway, so I found a lot of space in that work for innovation and creativity, but in a very focused way. What there's rarely been time for is the unfocused creativity, and I found pockets of that in this last year. Not at times, and I think I've learned. I guess what I've kind of learned is that I can go in and I can deliver things for a full day and be that person that's looked at and is staring. And I've done that in the last year a bit in training contexts and other things. But it comes at a huge cost. And I don't think I really appreciated the huge cost of that in those first 20 years. There's a cost on parenting wise, but there's a huge cost in terms of work and mind space and I think actual innovation, actual broad, open-minded innovation. And I feel like I'm creating opportunities and putting out ideas and having little moments of collaboration in a way that I never had time to do, and I only did them with very specific goals in mind. I need to work with you. We're going to collaborate. We're going to be innovative together to create the design for this specific play on this specific stage for these specific dates, but only within these very tight bounds.
Which is also good, but much more in the forced innovation, forced desperation sort of thing, because if we don't get it done, then there will be no set dressing, or these actors will storm off, or it will simply fail, right? So it's a much more set task. Now, if we take that as our kind of baseline thinking, that understanding those pockets of dream time or pockets of desperation, and we wheel back to where we started, what's a thing you're struggling with at the moment? What's a thing you'd like to change? Where's the thing that I might help? Or maybe not. I mean, maybe I can just help by being an audience, hearing you say, actually, things are great. That's a role I like.
I guess in a way it's what to build on,
Mm.
I knew what I was, for 20 years, I knew what I was building. I wanted to be a hugely successful theater director. And, and I thought I knew what that was. And to some extent, I did know what that was. I didn't necessarily know all the implications of it. I also didn't know that you could direct for big companies and win awards and still actually not be able to really pay your bills or know when your next job was coming. And that was a surprise. But so I guess it's I've tried to have a fairly open mind and follow what's interesting and follow relationships as well in this new career kind of journey. Follow relationships. Not always just what I want, but who do I want to spend time with? Who do I want to think with, to try stuff with? And so I suppose in a way it's the next journey for me is probably going to be a little bit about narrowing down for a while. Okay, I think I've spent a year and a half. I've been looking around. I've tried some things. I've built some relationships. Maybe the next phase is about going, okay, I'm going to take my eggs now. I'm just going to put them in one or two baskets. Maybe that's just for a year. And I guess, how to decide, I suppose. Yeah, that's a question for me. How do I figure out where to put those to put those eggs? Because it's very easy to just be pulled by, well, this is the one that's paying, or this is the one where I'm getting the most phone calls. And those are real things. But, that's the tail wagging the dog, isn't it? I suppose, in terms of life choices.
Let's take a small exercise here. And I had a good friend do this to me some years back. He's a very, very experienced business coach and a psychologist, and he offered to give me some free coaching because we were working on some projects together. His name is Jesper Toft, Danish. And he said, okay, so he came to my office and said, okay, so the first thing I want to do, Klaus, is here's a piece of paper, and I want you to write down, I want you for each line to write down something you did within the last 12 months work-wise, and then I want you to score it on from a 1 to 5 scale, where 1 is the least and 5 is the most, on how much you enjoyed it. I said, okay, well, 12 months, I do quite a lot in 12 months. He said, just start writing things down. Right? And not just go to work, but deliver this speech or run this event or design this event or fire this person or hire this person, whatever it was, right? Be sort of specific, he said, and then write down. I said, okay. And I said, I'll check back in an hour if you're not done sooner, because this might take some time. And I thought, oh, I need to be a coach. I just appear and I give somebody a piece of paper and then I say, I'll be back in an hour, and the meter starts ticking, except here it was free. And then I started doing that after laughing at a moment and thinking, Jesper knows what he's doing. And then I started writing, and it didn't take that long. I think it took me 10 minutes or so. And that list hadn't gotten that long, but it became very clear where my 1s were and where my 5s were. And my 1s were almost always to do with either administration technical stuff, like migrate that Excel database with 500 participants to our new system, or figure out how to put together that sales presentation, or stuff that was necessary but didn't excite me. Duh, that was why it got 1s. And the stuff that was the 5s was do a speech, stand on a stage, talk with some people, run this event, celebrate with your team, develop new ideas. And I thought, oh, this is pretty clear. Mm-hmm. And then I went and found Jesper, who was hanging out in the office kitchen. I said, Jesper, I'm already done. They said, well, that was fast. I said, yeah, and I already now have quite a bit of change to make in my professional life. He said, oh, well, that was nice. Then see you next time. Right? And it didn't. And could I have done it alone? Of course I could have. I hadn't done it. And just doing that small exercise of just writing down what do you do and how much do you like it? It may not do everything, but it's a pretty good place to start. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the Ikigai concept?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, find that kind of central point that brings together a sense of purpose, sense of your skill set. Am I remembering it right?
Yes, and it has 4 points. And one is, what is something that the world needs or kind of has a greater meaning? The second is, what's something you enjoy doing, which might not be the same? What's something that you're good at doing, which is also not necessarily the same? And what's something that people are willing to pay money for? If you can find something at the intersection of those 4, it doesn't solve every problem, but it's a pretty good place to start. And the reason I liked what Jesper did was because he started with, what do you like doing? Then we'll take it from there, right? What do you like doing? And if you're thinking, okay, I like doing this, I like doing that, then maybe if you look at it for a moment and just think, okay, what do I like most, or what do I like least? Then maybe that's going to show a very easy answer. Maybe not, but it's at least, it might be a simple solution.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to do that. It's funny. I think I came across the Ikigai. Is that how you say it?
Something like that. It's Japanese, so I'm probably butchering the translation, but
I came across that, probably about a year ago. I guess around that same time, a year and 2 months ago, I started kind of trying to just figure out what LinkedIn was, what it was it useful, what was interesting about it, and I found it very useful. But yeah, that kind of popped up, and I came across it, and I think I probably had a look at it and tried. I don't think I tried it. I don't think I was ready to try it. So it'd be interesting to try that now, kind of a year into this transition, actually, where I've probably got a bit more information to start with in terms of trying to answer that question, because it's incredibly complex. It's an incredibly complex question expressed with real simplicity.
Yes.
And I don't think I was ready to engage with the complexity of it, although I could see how it worked. I think I'll give that a try.
And it's an easy checklist approach to things. And again, it's not nuanced, but it's a pretty good place to start. And my advice is for people to, instead of making a 1 to 5 scale, the reason that worked with Jesper's thing was because it was just one thing. But if you say you have these 4 things you need to score an activity on, like, does it make sense for the world? Does it make sense? Do you like doing it? Are you good at doing it? And also, is somebody willing to pay for it? If you give it a yes, no, right? Even that simple thing, and then you can narrow it down later. But even that, you'll probably find that some of the things you enjoy doing, well, actually, you're not good at them. Or some of the things you're good at doing, you actually don't enjoy them. Or maybe you're good and you enjoy them, but nobody wants to pay for it. Or the world doesn't care, or the world doesn't need it. So it's like, okay, there's money in this. I like doing it. Okay, maybe I can live with the fact that it doesn't make the world a better place because it pays the bills, and then I can do that in another part of my life.
Mm.
Something doesn't need to solve everything. It's nice when it does, but it doesn't need to. And I think that's also a good place to go.
That's great. Thank you. The thing that comes to mind when you talk about this exercise you were given, the things you did in the last 12 months is that I immediately kind of can't help. I noticed my head immediately going to what was I paid to do, or what was the delivery thing, the thing I delivered. The reason what was the reason the person paid me the money? And of course, as per your examples, lots and lots of the things you do in the various jobs are not the thing that you're ostensibly being paid for. You're not, I mean, in this training program, for example, ostensibly we're being paid for going to Princeton and spending 2 days delivering this training to a very high standard. And in some sense, we're being paid for the planning and the time it's taking and the collaboration. But I know for a fact that I've loved the planning and the collaboration. And I know for a fact that from the buyer's perspective, they're not really paying for that. They're paying for the delivery.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they think of as the product. And of course, they're right to some extent. But in terms of what I've enjoyed, I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it Tuesday, Wednesday. I hope I'm going to enjoy it, but I also know a room full of 15 salespeople is not going to be my easiest audience that I've had in my career. I hope it goes well, but I also know that, they can be a tough crowd, as you know. But I already know how much I've loved the planning and the development and the collaboration with principally 2 colleagues who I've got to work with on this very closely for the first time.
And that's a really nice insight to have, because it also means that, let's say you're going to do this thing more. Let's say you turn it into a package and you go out either alone or together and try to sell it and do it 20 times a year. Right? Let's say that is a goal. Now, if you say, I like the planning part, I like the collaboration, I like the figuring it out and make it all come together, the writing, so to speak, right? But I'm not super necessarily happy about the delivery. Yes, I'll do it and I'll do it well, but it's not what kind of makes me really happy, or it's not where I go, yes, that was the best. Well, then you make sure that you have plenty of time for the planning and that the delivery part is as minimal as it can be. Or if you're me, it's the other way around. I don't like doing PowerPoint presentations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty good at it. I teach it. I have a online course on how to do PowerPoint. I've done it for insane amounts of people, but I don't like it. And that means that at one point I decided, and I especially don't like doing it to a deadline.
Mm.
So at one point I decided I'm going to stop doing PowerPoint for my presentations. I do a lot of keynote speaking. I very rarely have a presentation, sometimes, but very rarely, especially if it's a live one. So I said, okay, what if I just didn't do that? Well, then I wouldn't have to worry about deadlines and delivering it because it's not there. I wouldn't have to worry about these, oh, you need to do a tech test and we need to see if your presentation works. It's not there. Yes, I'll test the microphone, but I don't need to check if my slides work because there are no slides. It also means I don't have to spend the time figuring out the slides, and I don't have to worry about my own tendency to go completely overboard once I'm doing slides and say, oh, I'll do this, will take 4 hours and ends up taking 20 because I get into this, oh, wouldn't it be cool? And here's an idea, and let me remake the whole thing because I got inspired by somebody else's talk that I was listening to while working. Oh, so now I'm going to scrap everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just cut all that out. And that means when I do keynote speaking, I do the thing I like most, which is get on a stage and say something. And the thing I don't like, which is preparation, I don't do it, or I do very, very little of it, because I've learned that about myself and I've learned to structure it. And whenever people are like, oh, but we want this and this, that's not what you're getting. Or if you want that, you have to pay more or you have to make it nicer for me. I literally told a client at one point who said, I would like you to make a written proposal. I want you to come speak at our thing, and I want you to make a written proposal with this and this. And I said, I can do it, but it's going to raise the price. I said, what do you mean? Why is it going to raise the price? I said, because I don't want to do it. I want to do the thing, and we've already agreed that you want me to do the thing because you know me and trust me. What you're doing is to satisfy some people who are not us, and you're the one making the decision. And I'll do it, but it's going to take time I don't like. I'm happy to do the thing I like, and that's not going to cost you extra money. But if you force me to do something I don't like, that's going to cost you money. So you can choose. You're going to get the same end result. You're going to get the same talk. But if you make my process worse, you're going to pay for that. And if you make my process easy, you're going to save that money. Because I said, you're not just paying for the delivery, you're also paying for my process. And if you make my process easy or accept the process I propose, then you'll get it cheaper because I get to do stuff that I like. If you force that, you don't.
Yeah, I think if that's really that I think that's a very that's a really nice kind of line or principle, I suppose, really, isn't it? That and I think I clocked this a while back as well in my theater directing career, that in a way, and it's kind of terrible, but one of the reasons why pay is so low for directors, even though it's a highly skilled and highly involved and you're managing a lot of people, the pay is partly so low because people just really, really want to do it. They just really want to do it. And it's kind of a terrible cliche, but it's so competitive. And there's 50 people. I'm based in London, there's 50 people out there that want that job. And they're desperate to get it. And a lot of them come from much wealthier backgrounds than me, and maybe they can afford to do it. But you don't, you just have to. Yeah. Anyway, so there's an economic issue there, which is that people really want to do it, and so the pay is terrible. And I guess I realized that as I started getting paid more for other things, like a little, like I worked for an international education consultancy that worked with the children of very rich people, and I realized that I didn't want to do that as much, and so I could charge them a really high hourly rate and feel like, well, if the work comes in, it comes in. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And if it does, it'll be worth it because the money's great. And if it doesn't, that's okay.
Bingo.
I'm not going to miss it. But it's this, and then I've forgotten the other thing I was going to say, but tangentially gone into that. But I think that's a really good principle to remember. How much do I want to do it? That has to directly relate to your price.
Well, it at least has to relate to your willingness to do it, right? I'm in this privileged position that I do a lot of keynote speaking. I was just in a discussion about the other day that sometimes I get paid what I find to be a quite decent amount. I have plenty of gigs where I get paid somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 euros for a speaking gig. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but that most of my speaking gigs are in that range. I also do a lot of free speaking, and I do my best every time, right? I do what I can because I like doing it, and that has led to me saying to people, this is part of when people call me up or write to me, including you listening. If you've had me as a speaker, you'll know that I say, what's your budget? That's the price. And if your budget's zero, if you've got no money, then at least you buy me a good lunch. And if you've got 10,000, I'll do it for 10. If you've got 5,000, I'll do it for 5. If you've got 2, I'll do it for 2. And if you've got 25, then I'll be really happy and I'll do it for that. But I'll be happy either way because I'm not doing it for the money, though the money is nice. Of course, I like it, getting paid 10,000 euros to speak. Of course, I like that because it pays a bit of rent. But it's not my motivation. And that means that if I always say yes before knowing what the money is, then I know I'm not going to worry about the money. And usually people say, oh, that's so nice to work with because we have 2,000 euros or we have 7,000 euros or we have 0. And then they're incredibly happy that there's flexibility because I've said, I like doing this and I will do it whether there's money or not. And if there's money, I'll gladly take it. And if there's none, then I'll do it no matter what. And of course, you can't do that with everything. But if you can find some places where you either have, as you say, that walk away thing, or that's not the motivation, it makes the whole money question much easier. Both of those paths.
I think for me on that point, I think it's probably about harnessing. I think there's there's a possibility of harnessing this period really where I am just starting to get paid a little more money for things that don't necessarily take that aren't going to take me the amount of time that the person is kind of paying for because of the skill set and experience I've accrued, or where the perceived value is just much higher than I'm used to, and great, that's their perceived value, so I'll take that, and it's going to take some pressure off me for a period. I think it's about taking advantage of that really because in order to be in that position where you can say yes to zero, you have to have the freedom to do that. And I think
Mhm.
I haven't generally had that freedom, but actually I might be in a period where I will have that freedom second half of this year, for example. It feels like I might do. And that might be, yeah, that's a nice principle to grab onto. The other thing I wanted to say, which I lost my train of thought in, was that so in this case I really like the planning, but one of the things this is a zero PowerPoint training, by the way, just out of interest on the PowerPoint thing. It's one of our differentiation points that got us the gig was no PowerPoint, no lectures, no keynotes. It's active, it's doing, it's practice.
Nice.
It's innovation style, it's group style. If we're doing talky stuff, it's groups, it's short periods of time, it's reporting back, it's solving problems, it's reporting back, it's reflection. But actually, the bulk of it will be active and actually doing role playing. And we've got a couple of great actors coming in. I'll do a bit of role playing myself as well. But anyway, it's what's interesting about the preparation is that because it's me kind of leading on that to some extent amongst the team, the three of us. One is kind of sales expert, one's marketing expert, and I'm kind of facilitation expert, I guess. And so I'm leading on the structuring of it. And what that means, of course, is I get to structure it in a way that I will enjoy doing.
Hmm.
And that remains to be seen because it's going to happen next week, and I'm going to find out how much I enjoy the different things that I've planned. And of course, as you know, the degree to which you enjoy something has a massive impact on the quality that you bring to the table as a facilitator, as a trainer, as a coach, right? It's huge. It's
Mhm.
almost unquantifiably important. How the amount of kind of joy and the motivation cycle that happens within you, that you can give so much more. So it'll be interesting to see how much I enjoy that and whether I can kind of build on that planning ahead of the next times we deliver that. I think in this particular instance, we're probably going to deliver it twice more in London and in Asia for this particular company, in even just in the first instance. And then maybe they'll want more, maybe they won't. But I think we will get more cracks at it. And I guess that's one lens to take was where did the structure, where did the planning, and your example of this is I'm not going to use PowerPoint. So that's a piece of planning, right? That you used was I'm planning to not do that.
Mhm.
And that has released another wave of in you in those moments. It's increased, your energy, your dynamism in those speeches. And so similarly for me, I think that's a lens I need to bring to this next week in the debrief, in the personal debrief, in the group debrief. What were the things in this structure that we developed blind to some extent, just from our experience? We've not had a chance to test it. What were the things that brought the best out of us, and what were the things that were a struggle? And that might be a good lens.
I think so. And I think also there's something you said, and I want to touch about that briefly before we get to our roundup phase. And that is that you said it's incredibly hard being a director, which of course that's true, because there's 50 people who want your job, and I think it's more like 500, but there are 50 who are like actively breathing down your neck, right? And who are also qualified. And the pay is not enough because it takes too much time. And if I put on my Klaus the Evil Innovator hat, I'd say, yeah, but that's because you keep playing by the established rules.
Mm.
Right? When I was in India being the closing keynote at a wedding conference, like a conference for wedding planners, the biggest one they have in India for that, they'd invited me to come speak about that. And I said, half as a joke, half as true, that I said if I wanted to compete, if I wanted to start my own wedding planning company in India where they do insane weddings, like the
Mm.
stuff they do is insane. And these were the pros, the ones who do the really big stuff, not where the family does it, but the really insane budget, insane numbers, just insanity on all levels. I said, I can't compete on flowers. I can't compete on performance. I can't compete on level of detail or set design. If I wanted to compete with you guys, I'd go to India and I'd say, I have a wedding company. We do two things. We do minimalist European weddings. And then they laughed. And then I said, and they'd start on time. Because nobody in that room did things that started on time because they all felt that's not how it works. That's not here. The conference itself didn't start on time and they all laughed at that, but he was just like, that's how it is. So when you say it's really hard because you can't do it because the work is too much, I say, yeah, if you keep doing the work the way you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that George Lucas is rich, George Lucas of Star Wars fame, do you know why he got rich to begin with?
Oh, didn't he take a job making a film he wasn't interested in, and was like, I'm gonna have to take the job because this whole Star Wars thing isn't happening? I can't remember the story.
So the complexity is bigger, right? But one of the things he that made him get really rich was he said in Star Wars, he said, "Oh, I don't need a lot of money. Just give me X percentage of merchandise sales for this Star Wars thing."
Uh-huh.
Turned out to be a pretty sweet deal, to
Mm.
put it mildly. And part of is that if you're getting paid the same way as everybody else is, then you're competing on that. If you're working in the same fashion that everybody else is, if you're doing this and that, it's that as long as you're playing the same game,
Mm.
then the only way to win is to work harder, be better, and a bit of luck.
Mm.
And that's what you've been doing, right? You've been working like crazy. You've been putting in the hours, you've been doing the thing. But imagine that you'd said, you know what, guys, I'm going to do things a bit differently because we're not going to rehearse for this amount of hours. We're going to do more live. I don't know what it is, right? I haven't been a theater director at that level, so I wouldn't even know where to start, but I'd have some ideas on how to make it different. And I know that anywhere you go, there is space to think differently. Maybe it's that you get paid per mile instead of per hour, or maybe it's that you put in the work in this way instead of that way. I found that in the world of consulting, where I've done quite a bit of stuff at like high levels of consulting. My McKinsey work, for example, which I'm not allowed to talk about most of it, but one thing I can say is that most of the people I've met in really high level consulting are insanely smart, incredibly dedicated, and work like mad people, right? They just push through. What they also do is they have an unhealthy relationship to perfectionism. So if they've spent all night on creating this presentation they've been working on for 3 weeks, and it's now going to be presented to the CEO or the minister or some high level person, and it's on Monday morning and they've slaved away until 4 a.m. at night to get it just right, which happens all the time.
Mm.
Then on Monday morning, when the VIP cancels or moves the meeting 3 days because of life, then you would think at least it's now ready and we can just have it ready. We don't have to work more on it because it was ready to go. No, 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 no. Then they go in and hone even more and they check this. It could be even better. And they will keep on working until they make it even better. Where you could say, great, now we have 3 days where we don't have to work on that, where we can focus on other stuff.
Mm.
And my experience in theater, it's a little bit like that. If we have 2 weeks to practice, we're going to practice for 2 weeks. If we have 1 week, we're going to practice for 1 week. But nobody is going to say, oh, let's practice for a week because we would have been fine with that. And then we'll use a week on just chilling or doing other stuff or coming up with new ideas. Instead, we're going to fill the maximum amount of time we can with doing the thing as good as it can be. And then if we get more time, we're just going to spend that. And that's the new benchmark. And if you're constantly moving the benchmark, if you're raising the bar or lowering the bar based on what's available, you will always be stressed out and running too fast. Which means that when I've been doing consulting work with these hardcore work as demons consultants, I'd usually be done with my work a lot sooner than they were because I'd set some different standards. Because when I was happy with my presentation, and if there was 4 hours left, I'd say, I'm done. And they'd say, but you could align these margins, or maybe there's an even better photo for this model. I say, I like that for your wedding gift to your sister or to whatever. Yes, because they're going to look at it for the rest of their lives. But this is a presentation for a busy CEO. It's going to flash by in a second or two, and nobody's going to notice if there's a spelling mistake or if it's misaligned. And then they said, of course they'll notice, and you can't think like that. And of course, when I was teaching storytelling to consultants, I would put in these tricks, these mistakes, to see if they spotted them. And of course they didn't, because they're human, just like the CEOs, just like the ministers, just like the VIPs. But this belief that we need to pressure it to the limit, that's also in theater. That's in many high performance places. And if you want to not die of stress in those places, then you can't compete on the same terms as everybody else, because then you're either going to be the one working the hardest, as you were, or you're going to lose, or maybe even both. Need to change the game.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right. Yeah, I think also, I think, you know, in the, and I don't know if this is the same in consulting, but it kind of might be, that there's also this thing of it being kind of a young man's game. You know, that there's something about that kind of blinkered determination, and this kind of sense of like, well, I'm just going to do it for as many hours as I possibly can because I love it, and also the margins are so fine, and in order to excel and be above the crowd, I've got to put everything behind this. And I can see there's probably a similarity there with your consultants, and I'll also, there may be a similarity in the age demographic to some extent. I don't know.
Exactly that, and exactly that. So I watch quite a bit of Formula One racing, which I enjoy. And one of the things is that if you're not willing to drive so fast that you're clipping the barrier, that you're like millimeters from the barrier, then you're going to lose to the guy who is. If all other things being equal, right? That pressing yourself more is in sports, is a given. You watch the Tour de France, which is on right now. Then it's the people who are willing to go 80 kilometers an hour down steep hills on rainy, slick stones through a mountain village and get that last advantage out of their bike. Well, they're going to win over the ones who say, well, 70 is more than enough. I don't want to risk anything. Of course. But that's because they're all competing by there's a set of rules that cannot be changed. Except when somebody finds a way to change it, and then they win. And then the rules change to fit them. And that's sports. But in the world of business, the rules are changing all the time. Nobody knows what they are. Nobody agrees on what they are. Everybody thinks they know them. Everybody thinks they're stable, but they're really not. And sometimes you come across places where it's so obvious where you could change the rules and nobody else is seeing it or doing it. And if you're the one to do that, then that's an advantage. I sometimes have it with my coaching. People want to pay me per hour. Because, of course, you should be paid per hour because you're putting in hours. And I say, you can pay me per hour, but then I will talk very slowly and ask many questions. And suddenly they're like, oh, so you're saying it's kind of stupid to pay you per hour? Yeah, because you're giving me a financial incentive to be slow. Just like if you were paying me to be faster, then I speak like this. Then I'd ask no questions. I talk very, very fast. Because if I could do the coaching session fast, then I get paid better. Yeah, that's also a bad idea. So maybe we shouldn't value a coaching session based on the hour. Because faster is not better and slower is not better. Maybe we should look at that from a completely different perspective. And then they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. And then we figure out how to do it. But by breaking the rules sometimes is a way of changing the competition. And since you're in a position where you'd like to both have a family life, both do something you enjoy, also make a bit of money, and figure out who the hell are you now? Well, maybe it's a good time to experiment and break some rules in some of these spaces. And maybe it's going to work, and maybe it's not going to. But if you play by everybody else's rules, then it's a race to the bottom, or a race to most effort or most skill or most experience. Sometimes you have that, but it's hard.
Thank you.
With that, we have reached the end of our rope here, and that means we are at the wrap-up stage. Two things to cover here. One is, thank you for bringing this to me. Thank you for sharing, not just with me, but also with our listeners. We get to inspire some people out there, hopefully, who are sitting thinking, I recognize that. whether they're also ex-London theatre directors or do something completely different, they might recognize a thing or two of what we've been talking about. So thank you for that. That takes courage. It takes generosity. I appreciate that. The second is I want you to think for a moment, and I want you to think of 3 things you take away from our conversation.
Well, I've got 3 things. I think I'd like to keep writing this list because I think there's more than 3 things, and there's more than just the things that come immediately to mind. But I think one is change the rules, reconsider them, look at them, experiment with them. And I think another thing is design. What I've written is design for the joy of delivery. I'm kind of inspired by your point about dropping the PowerPoint, your keynotes, and this question of what next week is going to be, what next week is going to fly, is going to be joyful, is going to feel great in the delivery, and what's not going to feel great, and how can we use that information to design it better for us as the facilitating team. So designing for the joy of delivery. And the other thing is just this thing you've passed on. Thank you for that, of writing down some things you've done in the last 12 months in work and grading them as a way of identifying some patterns in relation to what's firing you, what do you enjoy doing, what's making you happy. So I think I'm going to take those 3 things for a start, and then I want to keep writing this list.
I like that. And the last one, for those curious, Jesper Toft is the guy who helped me with it, and he's easy to find on LinkedIn should you want to be inspired by that sort of simple but profound stuff. To all of you out there listening, thank you for being our flies on the wall. And from here, this has been the Innovation Coaching Podcast. You've heard Donnacadh O'Briain and me, Klaus Rostel, your host. Thank you for listening.